Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Rebellious Research Seminar Series. I'm absolutely delighted to have here with us Ian McDonald, who's going to be talking to us about observational filmmaking. So the title of Ian's presentation is Why Observational Filmmaking? Practice, Critique, and a Question of Reality. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and it's all yours, Ian.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Agatha. I'll share my screen in a while. I'll do a brief intro so that people, we're looking at faces as much as possible rather than the screen. But yeah, thank you very much, Agatha, for the invitation to this series. It is a privilege to be part of this series, which, as we were discussing just prior to coming live, it's been running for 5 years now. This is the fifth series, which is an amazing kind of achievement, and it provides an invaluable resource for all of us working in creative practice. And as I said to you, it's something that I often encourage my PhD students to go back and look at and explore the archive for talks. So thank you very much for inviting me. I just want to, maybe by way of introduction, I can see some colleagues on the call, but many people will not know me. So just by way of introduction, so I'm based at Film at Culture Lab at Newcastle University. And Film at Culture Lab, we've been running this now for just over 10 years, since 2015. And we've developed undergraduate programs and a PhD program focusing on documentary filmmaking, which I think I think is probably the only program that does that in the UK. So we're working with a range of levels, from students just starting out to practice-based doctoral work. But I think the important thing that I wanted to say is I think what's distinctive about what we do is really how we position documentary. I think firstly, we position it very much as a critical and creative practice, critical and creative arts practice, I would say. So we're always thinking about craft. It's very important, about creativity, of course, but also about criticality. Craft, creativity, and criticality kind of go together. And the second thing I think that I'd like to say about what we try and do in Film at Culture Lab is that we position documentary as cinema. So alongside the practical work, students engage with film theory. They engage with texts such as Bazin's What is Cinema, for example, amongst other things. And they take, as a foundational module, they take a fiction screening-based module on world cinema classics to give them that kind of exposure to the art and aesthetics of cinema across the globe. So in other words, what we're trying to do is just not to sort of present documentary as about content or even just as about representation, but as part of a broader cinematic language. And I think within that, observational filmmaking becomes a really important thread, because I think it does sit at that intersection between practice, cinema, and the question of really how we engage with reality. And that's really what I want to explore today. So this talk is about observational filmmaking, but it's also about a much larger question, which I'm going to go into. And at this point, perhaps I ought to share my presentation. It's not very detailed, don't worry. Okay. Is that appearing?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, terrific. So why observational filmmaking, practice, critique, and the question of reality? Sorry, I'm just getting here. So I guess the fundamental question that I'm really engaging with here is, what does it mean to engage with reality through film? And I come to this as someone who identifies as an observational filmmaker, but also as someone who increasingly feels that this is a practice, a form of filmmaking under pressure, in different contexts. Whether it's in the academy, observational filmmaking often gets described as kind of theoretically naive, insufficiently reflexive. Within the institution more broadly, I'm going through this process at the moment, submitting films to the REF, the REF that some of us will be familiar with, and sometimes it can be tricky, justifying or arguing about the research that underpins or the knowledge that's produced by observational film, but equally also in industry as an independent filmmaker, that wants my work to be seen more broadly outside of the academy. It's sometimes eyebrows are raised when you come forward with an observational film. It's sometimes seen as too demanding for audiences or outdated, and seen as more of a residual practice in the documentary landscape. Unless you're Gianfranco Rossi or Wang Bin or somebody like that, it can be difficult to get your film seen within a broad audience. But this is not really a defense of observational filmmaking, but I'm going to argue the case for observational filmmaking as a cinematic practice. I'm going to do this in two ways. So part one, and it'll be a fairly light touch, but part one, I want to bring together a set of ideas really about cinema, but particularly about time, about ambiguity, and about knowledge, to give a kind of a theoretical framing. And then in part two, I'll be working through some of my own observational films to think about observational filmmaking in practice, trying to apply some of these ideas. And I'll be looking at 4 films that I'll explain, but doing it across, if you like, 4 moments. So it's a bit schematic, but 4 moments in particular. I'll be looking at the idea of immersion, at craft, at the idea of pressure, the pressure of the moment in the field when you're shooting, and also resonance, what's left after the moment of shooting. But let's begin with a quote from no less a figure. If you can draw on someone like Tarkovsky, then I must be right. So anyway, if his quote, and I often, if anyone's read Sculpting in Time, I'm sure we all have. It is an amazing, it's the epitome of theory and practice and philosophical reflections on what cinema is. It's a great text for all of us to read. But there's one couple of lines in there that kind of jumped out to me, and I always quote it to my students when teaching observational film. And we teach a standalone module on observational filmmaking on our program. Tarkovsky says, if time appears in cinema in the form of fact, the fact is given in the form of simple, direct observation. The basic element of cinema, running through to its tiniest cells, is observation. Now, that only really makes sense, I guess, if we understand his broader argument, which is essentially that cinema's distinctive quality is actually not narrative or even representation, but it's the recording and the shaping of time. That cinema captures time as it unfolds, lived durational time. So if cinema's material is time unfolding, then the filmmaker's fundamental act is actually observation. So because reality unfolds in time, cinema records that unfolding. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that observational filmmaking operates like Tarkovsky's cinema. That's not the point here. I mean, that's obviously the case. But it's drawing on his idea of film as the shaping of time that I think is important, where observation is not simply a stylistic choice, but I'm making a claim that it's really fundamental to the medium itself. Actually, put simply, and Mechma Postma, I pronounced that correctly, but her article on observational cinema starts with a disarmingly simple quote, which is that to see takes time. So this idea of time, I think, is central. And of course, observation, this seeing or this looking, doesn't mean kind of a passive looking, as suggested by what I think is a horrible phrase. I understand why it's used, but the phrase "fly on the wall" to describe observational films. On the contrary, I think observational filmmaking is the opposite of that kind of disinterested, invisible presence. But it was put very well, I think, by Grimshaw and Rivette. Many of you will be familiar with their book on observational cinema, where they say that to observe involves attending to the world actively, passionately, concretely, while at the same time relinquishing the desire to control, circumscribe, or appropriate it. So I agree with that, of course. I think observational filmmaking is exactly that, that it's embodied. You have the presence is an embodied presence, that it's critical. And I think this connects nicely to David MacDougall, who has written extensively on observational cinema. And I particularly like this article. It's a short article. It's actually a conference presentation. You may be familiar with it, Observational Filmmaking, a Unique Practice, where he says that instead of focusing exclusively on its subject, it places the process of discovery about the subject at the center of the film. That's quite a nuanced way of putting it, really, because obviously it's about something, it's about a subject. But in terms of that process of observation, he's referring to the role of the filmmaker entering the field, and through the filmmaking process itself, it's like a process of discovery, which obviously requires intentionality, it requires presence, it requires reflection, all of those things. So for him, film is about coming to know something rather than just what is being shown. It's how it's being encountered, how reality is being encountered and understood. And I think MacDougall's idea here shifts the emphasis away from representation of a pre-existing subject to the unfolding of knowledge in time, where meaning kind of emerges through interactions between filmmaker, subject, and the viewer. Okay, so in other words, it's not simply about showing the world, but coming to know it through filmmaking, through filming. And actually, in that sense, it's not the idea that filming is secondary to research. You know, we know what we want to do and we go out and capture that, but it's not, it's part of the research itself. And I want to add just one more thing to this kind of theoretical framing, or the framing that I'm giving observational filmmaking, and that's drawn on Bazin. And it's this idea of ambiguity, because I think, I mean, Bazin, you know, he's obviously the theorist of realism and capturing reality. And for him, of course, it's about capturing a sense of the ambiguity of reality. Reality is inherently ambiguous. Sorry. So the idea is not necessarily to, you know, not at all to impose meaning on it, to resolve it, but to allow it to remain open. And of course, he has a particular view of this being achieved through long takes and deep focus, which he argues preserves temporal and spatial integrity of the event, where it forces the viewer to do that interpretive labor. But the key thing here, I think, is this idea of ambiguity that is inherent to reality. And so what I'm arguing then is, together, drawing on the ideas of Tarkovsky and time, of Bazin and ambiguity, and McDonald's idea of kind of encountering reality as a process of discovery and knowledge production, is really key in gives us a kind of a temporal, an ethical, and an epistemological grounding for observational filmmaking. So let's move on then. Rather than stay at the level of theory, I want to move on into practice. And I guess one caveat, not a caveat, but one thing that I would just to say before we move into the practice is that I bet often we see observational films as a kind of a genre. This is an observational film. And of course that's true, but I think we can also think about, and perhaps more productively, think of observational filmmaking as method. It's really a method that can be used, and in a couple of the films that I'm going to be talking about today, they're not purely observational films. Two aren't. They're kind of more hybrid. I have drawn on interviews within a kind of a spine of a film that unfolds over time in a kind of observational way. Okay, so I'm going to talk about these ideas with reference to four films, four feature documentaries that I've made. Often my collaborator is the filmmaker Geeta Jayaraman, who's on the call, and we worked on these films. And I'm going to sort of take each and sort of look at them with reference to each of those moments in observational filmmaking that I referenced before. And I'll talk a little bit more about them when we come to each film. So in terms of the moments then, I kind of identified the idea of immersion, sort of entering the field, and I'll show a clip from one of the films, Comrade VS, the idea of craft, the idea of pressure, and particularly the focus on ethics, and then resonance. And the first one I want to talk about is this film, which is purely observational, Comrade VS, The Lasting Campaign. And just to give a bit of context for it, so that you can situate the scene that we'll watch. So this is a documentary on a kind of a revolutionary leader in the south of India, the state of Kerala. And he is kind of like a veteran in the communist movement there. And this is actually was shot in 2016 during the 2016 state elections, when he was leading the opposition party in that election campaign. And the film really follows him over the period of the election campaign, 3 or 4 months of that election campaign, documenting, capturing, encountering with the election campaign and with him in different ways. So I'll just play a clip, and this clip is from the. This is actually the opening of the film, so I won't explain it any more than that, and you can just I guess the only thing I would say, if you were a student, I would be saying, just notice what you do, actually when you're watching this, what your thought process is, what's happening. Oh, I need to find the start button. Okay. So, of course, on a big screen, you would feel more immersed in the scene. But I guess, you know, what happened? Actually, not much happened in that, but yet quite a lot happened, I think. I mean, it was obviously one take, but hopefully you waited, then you watched, then you maybe searched for meaning, and through time, linking back to obviously Tarkovsky's notion of time, sort of meaning emerged, whatever that might be for you. I don't, you know, you could see my embodied presence, the selection of where to point the camera, what interested me as a filmmaker in that scene, with the kind of the other camera, the news cameramen coming in, but it's that idea of immersion, I guess, of staying with time long enough for something to emerge, which is dependent on the time. But of course, as I said, you know, as I've hinted, this doesn't just happen. It depends on a series of decisions that were often made in real time. You know, these are things that happen without any necessarily understanding that what will unfold. My intention in that scene was to film the V.S. Achyutanandan, the politician, 92 years old, who gets up very early in the morning and does these kind of exercises. And what was unexpected was the entry of the other camera crews coming into the frame, which I thought was great. And that for me was, you know, what I then actually continued to focus on. So you can see a number of decisions that happen in the moment, you know, where to stand, when to move, when to pan, when to zoom, how to respond to developments, all of these things happening in and of the moment. And I think, you know, what this speaks to unfolds in time, of course, but it also speaks to the importance of the second thing that I want to talk about, which is craft. So the second clip is from a documentary that was made a few years ago now, filmed over 1 year, which followed this guy, Jamie Driscoll, in his first year as the new North of Tyne mayor. So I think what I'll do again is just let the scene play out, and then each of these clips are like between 3.5 and 5 minutes. I think this is the longest at just under 5 minutes.
Turn right onto B1322.
So we'll go this way. I think that might be our building. Right. I haven't got a card yet. Got to buzz in. First day at work, reserved parking space. Nothing in it.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. Right, let's get ourselves in. Thank you. What I would like to do is a quick sort of 4 or 5 questions now.
Yeah.
And then try and sort of similar-ish to the BBC, get a few sort of setups if you're happy. I'm trying to sort of do creative things with it, so
Right.
Oh yeah.
I can't juggle.
That's the first one off the list. Mr. Driscoll, goodness, First day, very busy day ahead, very busy few months ahead. Climate change is phenomenally important to you. As important as climate change is that the kind of thing that people on the doorstep, people on the ground are saying, this is what I want dealing with, rather than things like housing or jobs?
Well, they're all interlinked. In order to fix climate change, we have to be looking at our transport system, our housing system, and that's going to be part of what we're doing. So declaring a climate emergency is not just a statement.
Wonderful. If I can get you in that
Yeah.
that's chair, sir.
I'll take that.
So what exactly does a new mayor do on his... Am I going in there?
No, I was just.
Oh, I come up to you, right. I've got you, right. Yeah. Okay.
Just give me a sec. Give me a level page, John.
Yeah, 1, 2. So what exactly does a new mayor do on his first day in the job?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So what exactly does a new mayor do on his first day in the job?
Okay, Anakin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So what exactly does a new mayor do on his first day in the job?
Grand.
You were brilliant. I was average. Can I bring you out here, sir? And this is our last thing, and then we're done. What I would like to do then is, this might seem a bit strange, but just get you to smile straight down the camera for 30 seconds.
Smile? Is it a smile?
Well, not, a gentle smile. Because you're going to be staring out at people through the TV sets. Yeah, so.
Jamie, if we maybe do it here.
Yeah.
Mid shot, Johnny.
I would say from like chest up, like that. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
I know you've got a meeting to go to. Might put a little clock.
Right, if you could just stare straight into there.
Thank you.
Just give me a sec. Start the countdown, Johnny.
Okay.
Yep, right.
Okay. Just actually looking at this for the first time with those two clips side by side, just in terms of the analysis of both of these scenes, the role of the performative nature of politicians and the role of the media, even Baudrillard's idea of simulacrum struck me then when, the journalist, the news journalist says, what does the new mayor do on his first day in the job? Cut to Driscoll typing away, working, which of course he's doing nothing of the sort. He's reenacting the idea that not the reality, it's the idea, it's the image that's more important than the reality. But these speak to, you come into these moments, capturing reality. Well, what reality? Where is the reality? Where is the action? I'm not particularly interested in what Jamie Driscoll's got to say as a politician, but I am interested in my encounter of that reality, the dynamics that are unfolding between him and the media. And to capture that, there's a kind of an intellectual process that's going on, and then the craft has to kick in terms of positioning, anticipating, holding, to capture that scene in a way that that time can then be shaped, compressed into a coherent scene. So, reprise Grimshaw and Rebetz's very important quote: to observe involves attending to the world actively, passionately, concretely. We can come back to these films in discussion, of course. But I'm keen to keep moving forward and go to the third film, and this is a film, Algorithms. It's a documentary about 3 young, blind or visually impaired chess players from India which we shot over a period of 3 years from 2009 to 2012. Both their development, their going to various chess tournaments, but also their backstories, how their families they come from, and their own stories of how they became blind or visually impaired. And I'm using this moment really to talk about pressure, the idea of filming in the moment when there is kind of decisions that have to be made in the moment, which can have massive consequences for the film. Often that comes down to ethical considerations about whether it's appropriate to film or not, questions about power relations, exploitation, voyeurism, all of those sorts of things that kind of are made in the moment. And I just want to show you this clip from Algorithms, and it's the scene where this boy is called Sai Krishna. He was the youngest of the three boys that we followed, and this scene is from when he goes to the World Junior Blind Chess Championships in Sweden, first time abroad. He was only 12 at the time, and lots of expectations on him. So this is a particular scene. I let it play out, and then you can see kind of some of the tension or some of the decision-making processes that might have been going through my mind.
Because he repeated those two moves on the board, but then he realized that you were just playing the same move, so he said, let's not play for that, let's go ahead.
See, this analysis only for this game. Okay, because now I clearly understood your style of play, your strength and your weakness. See, you are able to understand the threats of opponent, 2 move, 3 move, 4 move.
Yes.
Threat also you are able to visualize.
Yes.
But you cannot create a threat or create a plan more than 2 moves. So you have to improve on that. So first of all, as a beginner, you should understand the fundamentals of chess. So make your foundation strong. You should be able to win the game when opponent is not making mistakes. Anyway, you played well today. So continue this tomorrow. Yeah?
Referee 6.
Лофер было 2.
War 1, Läufer Felix Bier, Ondor, Läufer Felix Bier.
Лофер Цезарь.
Last உடம்பு சரியில்லை, தலை வலிக்குது, ஃபீவர். சொல்லு தலைவலி தலைவலிக்கு ஃபீவரா இருக்கு அது சென்ட் பண்ணிட்டு வந்துட்டேன் இல்ல போயிடுச்சு கேம் போயிடுச்சு சரிப்பா நீ அழுவாதப்பா பை He's thinking I am crying.
You sleep.
You sleep now, huh?
Don't cry if phone comes, huh? Don't cry. You should be strong boy. You should tell your parent, don't worry, there are 2 more rounds.
Okay,
And I'm trying hard. Don't take tension, okay? Otherwise there will be intention, okay? You will be a strong boy, okay? Yeah. Sleep now.
Okay, so I think it's self-evident, some of the issues, I mean, around kind of, I guess, the ethics of shooting a young boy who's, I mean, at the beginning of that call, when he's in the room, he's in the room alone with me. I accompanied him back to the room, and the coach and the 2 coaches sort of join a bit later. And at that moment, it did strike me about, you know, whether I should film rather than comfort, but as you saw, I decided to film. So for me, you know, it's a question of acknowledging that power relationship. I'm not there to necessarily even resolve it in a way, but is to the filmmaking itself shows these issues of choices that filmmakers have to make, but it shows that the pressure of ethics in that moment, that I think was the point I wanted to make. And just in the interest of time, because I wanted to keep this within 45 minutes, which I'll go a bit over, so we can have time for discussion.
Fine. Take your time, Ian. It's fine. We're flexible with time. It's absolutely fine.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. Anyway, let's move on then to, this is the 4th clip, and this is my current project. So this is not yet been, it's been graded, and that sound is being mixed on it, and I'm just doing a final few edits in response to feedback that I've been getting. But so this is not a film that's out yet, and you're going to get a sneak peek of one of the scenes in the film. But I Was Paolo, again, it was the period of filming is quite long. First year was 12 months. The Comrade VS was 4 months. The Algorithms was 3 years. And I've been filming this on and off for 3 years. And it's really following Paolo, who has this terminal disease called mitochondrial disease, and the care that he receives, or how he's looked after, the relationship with his mother, Loretta. Paolo was an aspiring filmmaker before he was struck down by this disease 10 years ago. So it's been a steady decline over the previous 10 years. He started out to make a documentary on his illness, but wasn't able to complete it. And that's kind of incorporated in the film. But again, I mean, there's questions, these films overlap in terms of issues, but the question here about, you know, Paolo's capacity, because he now has, basically, he's completely deaf. He has major seizures. He has no mobility. He finds communication very difficult because he has advanced dementia. A doctor described him as he's a 40-year-old, but with the mind and body of a 80 or 90-year-old man. So, so this particular scene stands out in the film because this is a moment when one of his old university friends and his best friend, Mickey, who you see in this frame, comes from America to visit him, and it's a surprise visit. Obviously a surprise to Paolo, not to Loretta and myself. So he essentially comes to visit, and it seems to animate something in Paolo, where he comes alive. And I think I'm showing this under the sort of thinking of resonance, because of the way in which, you know, I think this often in observational film, it's the way in which the images resonate, or the way in which it resonates with the audience and triggers something in the audience. It deals with, you know, memories, of course, but also meanings that exceed the frame, or exceed the clip that we're looking at. So I'll just let this play, and then we can move on. Okay.
Which way? This way?
Yeah.
Did you just want me to knock?
Mickey? It's that one.
Oh, this one? Oh. Oh my goodness.
Come on in. Oh, it's so good to see you.
To see you.
Come on in. Come on in. Let's see if he recognizes you.
Here.
Ian.
Hi, Paul.
Welcome.
Oh my God, so good to see you. Hey, Paul.
Paolo, open up.
How? Hey, Paolo. This is Mickey.
He doesn't know you.
It's all right. Hey, Paul. This is Mickey. Paolo, and Mickey.
Yeah.
Yeah? You got it?
Mickey.
Yeah. I know, huh? It's been like forever.
It's
a long
years.
Time. I know.
How are you?
I'm okay. Look at this doggo. Who's this guy?
You know Ian. He's like, what's Ian doing here?
Oh, Paul.
Oh, let me get you.
It's a long time. It's super good to see you.
I told him that he had a big
documentary.
I know. Oh,
Mickey,
Paul.
let me get you stuff, honey.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, Paul.
It's a surprise.
It's a big surprise, huh? Oh, it's been so long.
Yeah, it has. When did we see you last? I couldn't remember.
I don't know.
2018 or 19? I'm exhausted.
I'm doing okay. It's super good to see you, Paul.
Oh, sorry.
It's been. I know. And I was just thinking, it's been 20 years, 20-something
How
years.
you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing
He
okay.
can't hear anything, Mickey.
Oh,
so
the dog.
Thank you for being here.
Oh yeah, of course. Yes, Paul.
So if you need to communicate, you just need to say something on here
And then-
we'll show it to him.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. And let's
Ian,
see if
you
I
look
can.
terribly
Very good to see you. Very good
Why
to
don't
see
you
you,
come
Paul.
over here?
How's your kids?
The kids are fine.
Very good.
Do you want to see pictures?
see you.
Yeah.
My name is Paolo.
Okay. I know that. Let's see. And here, I'm going to delete it, and then I'm going to say, and you know who I am. Wait a second.
Meatloaf Baker.
That is true. And pronounced it well, true, with, yeah. And pronounced it well with the esh. Oh,
San Francisco.
I know. And Bremen, and Budapest, and New York.
Also.
And London?
Yeah. And London. Oh, very good.
Remember.
for me to some ended up being lesbian.
That's true. that is true. Let's get that.
I think she lives in New York.
Yeah. That was his girlfriend, by the way. So.
When I was in London, I detected I was diabetic.
That's true.
When Red Hot Chili Peppers, musician.
He was supposed to go to the
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh, the Red Hot Chili Peppers concert. I know, yes.
And I had the tickets for musician, but I detected that I was diabetic.
That's true.
So we had to leave.
You had to leave. Didn't go to the concert.
What happens was I peed my pants.
At the concert?
At the time.
No, he didn't make it. He didn't make it.
I didn't know that, Paul, but
he doesn't have any filters anymore.
that's okay.
Filters
it's still funny. Paul is still funny.
Okay, I mean, just kind of reflect on that scene in terms of you know, various things that are going on. But one of the things, you know, the question of time, I guess, is so important in so many different ways, as substantively in terms of how it plays out, the scene, but also, you know, in terms of what's being represented here, you know, the passing of time and in different ways and memories, and this scene plays on in this is, you know, obviously I had to cut it short, but it plays on in a particular way. But I had some feedback from a colleague who's familiar with kind of disability studies recently, and one thing she pointed out to me was something I hadn't thought about, certainly not when I was shooting, was that the length of time that I give Paolo in the frame to talk, which arguably, in terms of conventional, you know, film practice, I guess, slows the film down. I mean, it kind of, you know, we have to go at his pace. And to me, when I was filming, that just seems, you know, the thing that was a logical thing to do. It was about, I mean, I knew Paolo, I knew he kind of takes ages to express himself. And it was about, you know, giving him that dignity and the space to be able to do that. Which does lay you open to some criticisms, I guess. But then this colleague pointed out to me the concept of crip time in this, the idea in disability studies that time, you know, it operates differently often for disabled people in all sorts of ways. But one of these, in this particular instance, you know, there is a different. It comes back to Tarkovsky's idea of the subjectivity of time. And time is felt differently, and time unfolds differently for different people according to their own subjectivities. And I think, you know, the idea of you know, and the terminology crip, I understand where that comes from. It's a reclaiming of a derogatory term within disability communities. But the idea of crip time, I think, is quite useful, and it's something that it's kind of given me confidence in sticking with some of these scenes in this film, which are kind of often one take, extremely long, because that's the time that Paolo is operating on. But anyway, I just thought I would kind of mention that here. Okay, so just to draw some of these things together then, I guess, you know, what we're talking about here is observational filmmaking, really as a series of encounters with reality in time, drawing on Tarkovsky's idea of cinema time to inform or to help understand what we're doing in observational filmmaking. But you know, this idea of entering time, immersion, the idea of shaping time through craft and yes, through editing, the idea of, you know, the pressure in that time, often the ethical pressures to make decisions, and the resonance, the continuation of time after the scene has ended, or even after the film has ended. And I think this triad of time, presence, and relation, I think for me, is the three things that are going on that are quite specific to observational films, rather than other kinds of films that rely on observation. I mean, be it James Benning's structural durational films or whatever it is, but the idea of time unfolding, which is not specific to observational film, of course, but the idea of presence, which I think is important, embodied presence, as Leacock famously said, the feeling of being there is important, and relation, that these are social relations that one is exploring, the social relations that you as a filmmaker become part of. That this triad, I think, of time, presence, and relation, I think are important in observational film. And I guess then there is, I mean, I quote Balsom in the abstract, which you can see that I've moved a little bit away from that abstract. But I think Erika Balsom, this piece that she's written, that you probably will know, it's quite a well-known piece on the reality-based community from a few years ago now. If you haven't come across it, then I think it's one of the best things I've read in a long time. It's a brilliant polemic and a beautiful piece of writing. But she is really making the case for the contemporary urgency of observational filmmaking. And you can imagine how that was kind of like music to my ears in some ways, given where I started out this presentation and saying that this felt like a form of filmmaking that was under pressure, that was kind of dismissed as naive, theoretically naive, that wasn't looked upon in any excited way within the industry, et cetera, et cetera. It also, you know, it's not a difficult mode of practice to do. It takes time. It takes a lot of craft. So, you know, it's lots of reasons not to do observational filmmaking and to opt for other forms of observational filmmaking. But in this piece, she argues for a rethinking of the theory of observational film, makes the point that we have kind of perhaps overly relied on kind of on filmmaker accounts of their own practice. And often observational film gets kind of reduced to or focused on direct cinema, you know, the form of cinema that emerged in the 60s and 70s, and the filmmaker accounts of what they were doing. You know, these were professional filmmakers, they weren't academics. Penny Baker talks about, you know, when you ask him, he will say, well, I'm like a cat, you know, just in the corner of, you know, great, and, you know, Leacock will say it's, you know, the idea of being there. They don't really give us a lot in ways to really theorize. And I think that often we've relied too much on those practitioner accounts. And that's laid this mode of practice open to easy criticism, especially, and this is Balsom's point, especially in this kind of postmodern turn, in the term towards post-fact, towards media distribution of misinformation. And now, you know, post Erika Balsom's argument, the AI and the way in which AI can produce images, which are kind of very as good as how reality might be represented. So I really recommend this piece, but I'm using it here because, as she says, truth is not out there waiting to be captured. Forget talking about truth, that's a red herring, but reality is, and it's her insistence that there is a reality out there. And that in this era of misinformation, of the media dominance and AI and all a narrative, which has led in the documentary sphere to a turn away from engaging with reality and towards a more subjective, reflexive first-person approach, which is, you know, it's not to dismiss that. A lot of that is healthy, but maybe this is a moment in which we need to return and rethink observational film. And there's good political reasons for wanting to do that. You know, to create, as she says, a shared discourse around a reality that exists out there that we can discuss and debate. So I think Erika Balsom is really a call to arms for us to reconsider not just how we've conceived of observational filmmaking and theorized it, but also why it might be particularly important that we have that sustained encounter with reality over a period of time, where meaning emerges and where audiences are invited in and trust them to do that interpretive labor and find meaning within those images. Okay, so why observational filmmaking? The original question. This feels a bit like the Monty Python meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? Is it 42? I think that was their answer, right? 42. Well, my answer is kind of not 42, but it's kind of in some way as underwhelming. But because it allows us to encounter reality in real time. And it sounds simple, but framed. I've drawn on a number of ideas from time with Tarkovsky, Bazin's argument about the inherent ambiguity of reality, and MacDougall's notion of the process of discovery of meaning emerging through the filmmaking process. And all of that really comes down to this idea of encountering reality in time. And Balsom, I think, reminds us of the importance of that. So we're up to the hour, actually. So thank you all very much for listening, and we've perhaps got time for questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian. It was just so inspiring and so fascinating. So I will open for questions in a second, but I'll just take my privileged position as a person who chairs it, or if you like, runs it, to ask you my first question, if that's okay with you. And I think it's more a reflection rather than a question, really. But I just I could not notice. I could not, just ignore the fact how refreshing it was to, in a busy life we all have when we constantly run from one thing to another, to just really watch the fragments of the films you so kindly show us and shared with us, and listen to you talk about time and staying with a moment and immersing ourselves in this really interesting reality. And I think it's so powerful, even more so today, because we are constantly, and this is more kind of about life than filmmaking at first, but really we just constantly rush from one thing to another. And I think this kind of filmmaking just really forces us to just slow down. And it was just so beautiful to hear you talk, where you explain how you work with Paolo and how you try to adapt to his rhythm. And it reminded me of my own filmmaking with indigenous communities in Colombia, where I was filming the elders. And sometimes when you ask them a question, they just really have a very, very long way of answering that. They don't necessarily give you a one-sentence answer. It sometimes takes an hour. And in my conversations with them, the community were very clear that it's really rather disrespectful if I wanted to just chop it into my, whatever fits my desired film length and duration. I think it's such an interesting thing. But the reason I'm thinking about it is because obviously time is such a commodity nowadays. And as you were talking and as you were showing us this film, this is what I think is observational filmmaking is so powerful. The fact that you slow down and the fact that you take so much time looking at those situations make this time much more meaningful and well spent. So paradoxically, we just kind of reversing this idea. Well, you have to be really mindful about how you feel this time, whether it's your life or your film, and actually staying with some situation, really immersing yourself in what happens, and just being patient and just waiting for things to unfold. Suddenly, just changes this relation between what merging yourself in kind of unfolding time and the situation is. And I'm probably rambling a little bit, but I wonder if you have any reflection on that in relation to kind of how we perceive time right now. And we know younger generations have a very short attention span. It's very difficult to put someone in front of the screen and make them watch the film from the beginning to the end. And suddenly we're talking about just really immersing ourselves and staying with the situation. I wonder if you have any reflection on that. It's a very vague question, but it just really made me think.
Yeah, I think it's. No, I agree. It's a good reflection, Agatha, and I mean, we're all familiar with it, right? we live with the pressure on time and the increasing speed of things. I mean, the speeding up of everything and how that's happening in filmmaking. But you know, I think it's in some ways, you know, I'm not doing this as a kind of a political project particularly, but you know, I take seriously Balsom's argument that there is a kind of a political necessity, and I think that, you know, we kind of have a responsibility as educators in this regard. You know, I'm sure if there are other educators here that teach film to students, you know, there's constant pressures on us to always respond to the latest forms of filmmaking. And even now, you know, should we be teaching, you know, TikTok videos or, you know, storytelling that's done in these micro forms to sort of respond to, you know, changing trends and that sort of thing. Now that's an open question. You know, that's for me though. So long as we're not, you know, just going with the present or going with industry trends or cultural trends, but also it's based on, and I think I've seen this at Newcastle with our students. They're no different from any other film students, I think. But you know, when you do give them a framework, when you do give them the exposure, you know, show them long, slow films, they get them to engage, you know, with this form of filmmaking. You know, they embrace it. You know, we sometimes can underestimate them and just accept them where they're at, rather than, and it doesn't mean to say that they kind of ditch everything else. You know, they take it on board, and one of the things that's happened at Newcastle, which has been really inspirational, in fact, Geeta's on the call there with her. She teaches a world cinema module in the first year, and the students watch these black and white classics and, you know, films from different parts of the world, and out of that they've now set up their own kind of film society, and they continue to run these world cinema classics. In fact, after this call this evening, they're showing Tarkovsky's Mirror. You know, they programmed it. So I just use that as an example of the way in which I think we can have some kind of effect here. We can exercise some agency. But I agree with you. And for me, it's often the institutional framework in which we operate always works against this. I mean, we're also busy doing so many different things. And ultimately, the institutions that we work in kind of reward outputs, right? Outputs that can be published, or outputs that, and the interest is less in what you are putting out there than, you know, than the volume. Yeah. And that given those pressures, you know, it's easy to tend to move towards maybe short films or more, you know, desk space work or whatever. So yeah, I think, you know, it's just trying to, you know, and I know this is the thing around time and film that you touched on, and that your anthropological point, I think, was really, really interesting, or the ethnographic point, because I think this is something that within anthropology, I just didn't have time to mention it. It would have turned into a lecture. But, you know, within anthropology, they've had years engaging with this, probably right from the 80s, since the cultural turn in. I mean, anthropological filmmaking goes back a long way. But, you know, there was always a sense in which text-based anthropology was superior, more important than film-based. But I think, you know, with the cultural turn that happened in anthropology around the mid-80s, and there's been lots of really interesting debates. And I think in the discipline of anthropology, they've kind of got to grips with it very impressively, actually. And there is a sense now in which film is kind of on par with text-based. And Sensory Ethnography Lab have done an amazing work in progressing this. But I was reflecting on this. I think, you know, there is a sense in which that's something you can, it's kind of expected within the idea of time, as you said, and respecting the, you know, the subjects and getting, you know, immersing yourself in their reality, and that being reflected in the form of the film is part of the anthropological enterprise. And they're producing work which is explicitly within the academic framework. Sensory Ethnography Lab have been exceptional in breaking out of that, but they're the exception, right? Whereas I think I don't position myself like that. I don't position my work as being primarily academic. I'm kind of, you know, I'm if you like, exploiting the, I mean, it's twofold. I am kind of exploiting the privileged position of being within the academy, which I'm thinking about film, I'm teaching film, I have access to equipment, etc., etc. but I'm trying to make films that kind of transcend that. They're not, that they kind of go beyond that and into the independent filmmaking circuit. And I think that's where the challenge comes around, this, at what point do you, with algorithms, that was initially meant to be kind of purely observational, but there are some things that are actually quite difficult to, when you're trying to take a film to a broad audience, then how do you deal with kind of history, backstory? How do you, so you kind of then bring in interviews, and then you maybe might bring in some music, just how to carry certain scenes like the chess playing and things like that, hopefully in a restrained way, but you do. So that's what I said before, the observational. So I'm trying to position myself in a cusp between, sort of the academy, but also the independent filmmaking space, and that kind of, these pressures do come to bear on that. Okay, I'll shut up.
And it's really interesting because it really links, I guess, depends on how you position yourself. It's quite interesting because it links, both to the way you might want to, and not just you as Ian McDonald, but just really anyone working in this kind of position, is how you can potentially want to think about the distribution of your films as well as a filmmaker, but also how you potentially, gather funds and cast and, well, not cast, crew to make it happen. And the reason I'm mentioning that, because I can imagine in a traditional academic funding for, let's say you want to fund your film with an academic, from academic funds, it's sometimes, as we all know very well, quite difficult in relation to any kind of creative practice where you have to really tell exactly what is that you are trying to do. Whereas obviously in a case of observational filmmaking, you not always know what's going to happen. And that's obviously the challenge. So I don't know if you have any comment on that part. Yeah.
That's the curse, but also the joy. I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, right? So we can't say this film will, and some, but that's also the joy of discovery. But you can frame it in certain ways, that kind of, convince, often it's track record, they have to trust you, but you don't know when this will end. Algorithms was meant to be a 6-month shoot, it ended up as 3 years because the story demanded it. Always knew the first year would be 12 months, and there was a kind of logic to that. Paolo's, where does that end? I mean, I know that he's got a terminal disease, but where do but that for me is the joy of it, and how it emerges through the practice and the relationships that are explored through that practice. One of the ways in which I've kind of, this is just a personal thing, the way in which I've tried to sort of deal with the problem of time and money is, obviously we do get time for research, and so filmmaking is my research, and the great thing about the Academy is that they accept that films are accepted as ref, so that's good. So it's part of our job. But I think it's also that I shoot myself and I edit myself. So, bring other people in, get lots of feedback, people, support in different ways. But essentially, at least I have the feeling that I know even if I don't get any money, I can make this film if I have the time. It's a lot easier that I'm not dependent on big money. And I'm not dependent on crews, essentially. So I think, and that's something that we try to teach on our program, is the idea of solo filmmaking as well. So that's that you find ways of dealing with it. Of course, money is, this is a business where you can't avoid the need for money. Distribution, it needs money. So but in terms of the production of the work, I think I found a way in which I can make it happen. For as long as I'm physically able to do that.
And it's always so inspiring to hear examples like this, and quite funny that you mentioned time, obviously time being the biggest obstacle for many of us to actually make films, which is funny because we kind of look at the question of time on two different, very, very different layers here. I wanted to invite people from the public if they had any questions, but as we wait for this, perhaps I would like to, because we also mentioned distribution. You've mentioned how sometimes it's tempting to, include other elements in the films just to make it more accessible, if you like, to wider audiences. So I would love to see, films like yours in every mainstream cinema as well as every other avenues. Where do you think is a really right place for us to watch observational films? Where do you think it would be,
Yeah, I started off by sort of saying that we see position documentary as a form of cinema, as cinematic.
Yes.
So there is a sense in which, the big screen, the darkened room, the audience, the single focus on that experience, and the discussions that flow from that. But we know what's happening to cinema. We know how difficult to independent cinema. We know how, and of course there are festivals, but it's a minefield, festivals, isn't it? And it's and many of them, they don't really. Shout out at this point for Docs Island. I mean, they have one of the few festivals that respect observational film, and they have the Albert Maysles Prize. So they have a strand just on observational feature-length observational films, but they're very much the exception. But so yeah, it's difficult. Festivals and if you can get a theatrical release, there's nothing like that, but it is increasingly difficult, and often it means you have to pay for it, right? I mean, sometimes universities can help here. You can have sort of limited screenings, which can be supported by university, relatively small cost, and there is a bigger agenda in universities at the moment around impact. That again, because it's driven by the ref, isn't it? And demonstrate impact through your films. It's sometimes difficult with observational films, rather than something which is much more, kind of to the point, and messages are clearer and can be used as part of some kind of awareness campaign. But, there is ways in which now increasingly we have to package films or position them in that can speak to the impact agenda and get support from university to take them, on limited screening tours, that sort of thing.
I think it is. Sorry, have I interrupted you?
No,
Sorry.
No.
I think this is the kind of interesting element of just kind of sitting across this kind of two worlds, really, as as a filmmaker who obviously wants to make sure that films are being seen by us as wide, as a large amount of people as possible, but also responding to its academic requirements. And I think it's really important that we kind of find a way to, and you're obviously doing this so well with your films, but I think it's really important we find a way which kind of sits in between. And it was a really interesting conversation at the last BAFTS conference. I just recently came back from, where we sat together as a group of people who kind of work on the verge of these two, sometimes very separate and fields, and we thought how nice it would be if we could really speak as a large group of people and find a way to curate cinema which is happening, on the outskirts of academia, and at the same time has a really huge potential to speak to a wider audience, because not everyone goes to film festivals, mostly because of the cost of it. And I think there's so many amazing titles that would be really, really fascinating for people out there. But it's just so sometimes difficult for us to just make it. And I'm not talking about your films here. I'm just talking more in general terms, how many of filmmakers working on this kind of, difficult crossroads, how difficult it can be at times, really. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Just seen Len's.
Yeah, I was just about to say, yeah. The question is an impact as a name not more or less an opposition to ambiguity? Thanks for the great talk. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah. Hi, Len. Yes, you hit the nail on the head. Of course, exactly.
Yeah.
That is the problem. So, and you're kind of faced with a choice. Do you then shape projects to meet the funding agendas, or do you kind of stick with what you think is the kind of film that you want to make, whatever that is? For me, it's about trying to be, this encountering with reality. I mean, my background before as a filmmaker was as a sociologist, and that was all about understanding reality, encountering reality, and my filmmaking kind of stems out of that. So rather, so that's the key thing. So I'm trying to, I like to think, and so far, I think this would always be the case, that I try and use university agendas and university opportunities for funding to support what I'm doing, and if it doesn't, then it's fine. But I'm certainly not going to be driven by that and let the tail wag the dog.
Yeah, interesting. So I have another question, if I may, because I actually have a PhD student who's trying to make quite an experimental approach in terms of understanding, and I wonder what you're going to think about it. He's basically trying to make exactly the same film, following or kind of translating it into different modes of representations as proposed by Nichols. And he's just trying to see, he's trying to see how the same story could affect his relation to his subject, but also potentially how the reading by the audiences could be affected. What's your thought on this?
What's my
What's your thought? Yeah.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Yeah, I think there was a filmmaker. What's the Dutch film on glass making? Very famous Dutch avant-garde filmmaker that made it as a conventional documentary. Simon, Google it, please. You'll find it. It made it as a conventional documentary for the commission, and then made it as the film he wanted to make as an experimental film. And the experimental version is the one that's gone down as a canonical, a canonical film, the one that people remember. But this idea of, how you engage with a subject through different forms, different modes, if you use Nichols' term, is interesting. And one would imagine that you're going to end up with six, if you're using the 6 modes that he has, six completely. Thank you, Raisa. Raisa's on the call somewhere. Yeah, Raisa, Bert Hastra. Yeah, that's the filmmaker. To make you end up making inevitably and necessarily so. Otherwise, Nichols' modes of documentary doesn't work right. We can dismiss it. I mean, I think we do. It'd be interesting. Hopefully, this will lead to a critique of Nichols' modes. I think we've kind of relied too much on his modes of documentary practice. It's a nice schema, but I know it has been extensively criticized. But I think it does just draw attention to, it's the practice is what produces. It's not the subject, right? And the mere representation. It's the form of engagement that produces meaning, as much in observational as in these other forms. But yeah, it's ambitious.
I think that it's quite interesting when it comes to the discussions I have with the student at the moment. It's like how he even understands how he would, just for the lack of a better word, translate just moving from one mode to another. So how can it effectively be the same story? So I think what he's trying to stay with at the moment is just going to be the same contributor. So he's going to pick a contributor, and this is where same story ends. And obviously, depending on what's going to happen and depending on how he's going to approach each of these modes in terms of practice.
Is it one film then which goes through each of the modes?
Well, that's what he's planning. This is what he's planning to do. It's a 6 short experiments.
Yeah, okay. Because Nichols says that any film, that's the filmmaking, right? No filmmaker says, I'm going to adopt, actually, apart from observational, but it's not conscious in a way that here's Nichols' modes, I'm going to select this, which
of course.
You start more intuitively, more organically. And as Nichols recognizes the obvious that most films, are layered with different types of different modes. There'd be a dominant mode of practice, but it will kind of.
But that's where the experiment is quite interesting, because he's trying to be quite pure about it, and I just think this is going to be quite an interesting one. So just back to your filmmaking. So what's your kind of, obviously you're working on the Paolo project, which is really interesting. What is the next thing you want to explore for your filmmaking after this film? Like what are you really interested in with where it's going to take you going forward? And perhaps I would like to ask, how do you come up with your ideas? Like, is it that you find an interesting person or a situation? How do you approach your filmmaking from a kind of practical?
I think every film kind of has a different origins in terms of it's normally as a result of being attuned to the world, encountering reality and one idea leading to another idea. Algorithms started off as me reading a newspaper in the days when you read newspapers in India, and coming across a short news report about blind children playing chess, and the way they described playing chess is very vivid. It's kind of the world of epic heroes and villains and animals and all this kind of stuff, and that just piqued my curiosity, and that one led from there. So that just happened to be reading the newspaper. The first year was because I wanted to make a film in Newcastle. And I'm very interested in politics. I'm really interested in political, radical politics. And here was this guy, on my doorstep that was running to be mayor, and he was from the Corbynite wing of the Labour movement. So that was kind of good. What's the other one? Oh, Comrade VS. That was it's a similar thing. It was being spending a lot of time in India, and this incredible figure that was declaring that he was going to run. I thought that would be and he's such an iconic figure with a massive following. So, and then Paolo came about because I was asked to do some filming for the medical school here of some lobbying that they were doing in Parliament, which I agreed to do. And in fact, you can see that's ended up in the film. But out of that, I met Loretta. And they encouraged me to sort of follow a patient, and maybe that's the best way of raising awareness, is to tell a patient story rather than doing a film on scientists saying why this research into mitochondrial disease is important. So that's where it started. And when I met Paolo and Loretta and found out that Paolo was a filmmaker, that kind of decided it for me, because he's got this archive of his own films. He started documenting his own work. That started there. So they have kind of. But it's about being, getting yourself out there in the world and reading and talking to people and going different places. The next project is a similar sort of thing, really. It's a guy that, again, Newcastle-based guy called Smeo Basso, who's formed the Bosnia Genocide Educational Trust. And he approached me to do some editing of some interviews that he did of people who had fled Bosnia in the 90s from the war, or people, either as adults or as young children, or were born very, just after they arrived in Newcastle. So it's about kind of telling their stories. And the one character we met in that, he's got a very interesting story to tell. He's not Bosnian. He's a former member of the British Army that fought in Bosnia. An amazing story. So I'm working with him on that. And I don't know if Leonard's still on the call, but Len is also going to be involved in that as somebody. He's just finished his PhD on kind of Bosnia and the Bosnian War and kind of new storytelling in the Bosnian War. So again, it's just, there's no one source, right? It just happens. They keep coming, so that's the great thing. You think, when I don't know if it's our antennae, but at the moment, that's enough. I'm finishing one film and there's another film about to begin, but I'm confident that once that film is further along the line, something else will pop up. Yeah.
That's really nice. I have to say I'm quite envious, because I feel like I've been so sucked into the academic grind. I have very little time to work on stuff, although it's actually changing right now, so I more news about it later. So I don't know, Leonard, would you like to since you're involved in that project, do you want to say something from your side and add to what Ian is saying? Sorry, I'm putting you on a spot right now, but we just have a couple of minutes if you like to say something.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I can't turn on my camera because I haven't allowed this new software to give access to my camera. I just realized that. I mean, it's really early days on that, and it ties in with the film that I've been making for my PhD, which is almost finished. But I think, we probably shouldn't sort of speculate too much about what is going to come from that, because it's sort of in that stage where it could go in lots of different directions and it might not happen at all in the end. So
that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
I would sort of be, but it is. I mean, for myself, I did my PhD partly on audiovisual archives and how you can work with material in a way that sort of reactivates them in ways that are not necessarily easy or obvious. And I think it's interesting because we're talking about observational, but in a way, I think if you approach the archive as material that you encounter rather than something that is already fixed in its meaning, then you can apply a lot of the same principles to that kind of material and make interesting films out of that. So I thought I'd mention that.
I think that's thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, you're right. And on the, who knows? We have to start, and then we'll see. And that's the joy. We don't know what form it will take for all sorts of reasons, which we needn't go into to here. But it happens. The Jamie Driscoll. I spent a year filming him, and that ended out as a film. There was a logical end. But then I filmed his subsequent attempt to be re-elected as mayor. Spent maybe 6 months filming him and that hasn't ended up as a film for particular reasons. There's no problem, but I just don't think it's strong enough to work as a feature film. So, but it's there, and it may well be that something I revisit if, and I suspect it is a case of when rather than if, he runs to become mayor the next time round. So there will be. So it's not lost, but it's it becomes archive at that point. And
and I think this process is also quite interesting because I think it's what's beautiful about I think observational filmmaking and many other forms of creative practices. Again, number one, you don't know where it's going to take you, but number two, sometimes the process takes you to unexpected avenues, and it's quite interesting to kind of pause the project and maybe revive it at some point in the future. And this is exactly what you're talking about right now. So I'm aware of the time, but I'm going to ask you a final question. If you're going to hate this question, so I'm going to apologize in advance, but I'm going to have to ask anyway. So what do you think is the future of observational filmmaking?
Wasn't there the future is orange? Wasn't that an advert? Yeah, I inserted some orange into my PowerPoint presentation. That's the future. Well, because reality is that the reality will continue. So we have to continue with the media. The mediascape may not be so receptive to it. Politically, it's challenging, but these are reasons that we need to continue. So I have no problems with that. Yeah,
I think it's a beautiful answer. I really think, and I think it's again so refreshing to sometimes just slow down and look at things properly. And I think this is, as I started with my first question, I think it's just genuinely so refreshing, and it is the closest we can get as equivalent of just simply being somewhere and participating in those situations. And it was really, really hugely valuable. So thank you so much again. It has been such a pleasure to have you here with us today, and really great conversation. Really, really lovely. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I'll make sure the recording is online as soon as I possibly can make it available. And I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a lovely evening. Thank you,
Agatha. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.